Okay, welcome to the best of Microsoft Ignite. This is my favorite presentation to do all year. And one of the reasons it's my favorite is because it gives me an excuse to watch all the interesting Ignite sessions in double speed and turn them into something that you can take in an hour. Now, that hour is going to be a little bit of an intense fire hose today because I think this is the year that I have more content than I've ever had before. So, going to do my best to fit this all in. We'll definitely make this deck available to everyone after the session today. And this is going to be a blast. Like, there's so much cool stuff in the context of Ignite this year. I'm really looking forward to experimenting with some of this and showing you many of the demos of it today. So just to introduce myself, my name is Nathan Wisnowski. I'm Concurrency's Chief Technology Officer. Get ready to have a ride for an hour. Please use the chat if you have questions. I'd love to dig into those questions as we go. And I would definitely like for your involvement to exist at a couple of different parts of this. We're gonna have a couple of tests as we go. So get ready. This is going to be an awesome ride through an hour's worth of content. We do have this available later, so you can download it and watch the recording if you want to catch back up on a particular topic or learn more about something that we covered. All right, so let's start off on our journey. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about that was talked a lot about at Ignite. I mean, it was practically the AI conference. Let's be honest. Like this was from commodity AI to mission-driven AI. It was the AI conference. I'm going to start with some really interesting mission-driven AI capabilities that that excited me. I think in terms of like bearing the lead, I am not doing that. Mission-driven AI is the lead of Ignite, and one of the things that blew me away at Ignite this year was GPT-4 with Vision. If you have not played with this in the Microsoft Copilot experience, it's not M365 Copilot. If you just play with it inside the Microsoft Copilot, it used to be called Bing Chat Enterprise, now free. You have now not just GPT-4 for text, but also GPT-4 for vision. And what does this mean? This has changed the way that we can apply artificial intelligence to images and video, not creating like pictures or creating just images from text, but understanding images in the way that a human can understand those images. So like traditional AI training mechanisms, like if you were thinking about training on this image here, a dark green and olive overcoat, I would have had to give it 100 examples of a green overcoat, 100 examples of a not green overcoat, 100 examples of something that's not an overcoat at all, so it can accurately figure out that that's an overcoat. That the amount of time involved in doing multimodal or image-based recognition was a big investment to be able to do something that humans can do extremely well, which is to look at an image and reason from it. This is now something that GPT-4 with vision can do very, very effectively and add this sort of base level of understanding to any kind of image-based processing. And then maybe we can build on that if we need additional specificity to it. But this is so exciting. So for example, identifying this dark green or olive overcoat, or understanding the summarized advertisement. This was a video. It watched the video and then summarized what happened within that video in the context of text. Let me show you some other really interesting examples of this. So this is a little bit of a demo. I want everyone to put in the text in the chat what you think that says. And give you a second. What do you think that says? What is this? Okay. So here is what GPT-4 says. The text in the image is not clearly readable due to its handwritten nature, but appears to, in the signature, look something like Mark or something similar. The text portions are blocked out and cannot be read. It kind of looks like Mark, right? Maybe it's Mark, maybe it's something else. All right, we're on the right track. We're starting to understand that that could be like a signature. Some person I talked to said it was a doctor's handwriting or something along those lines. Okay, getting a little bit more interesting now. What do you think that second one says? Text extracted from this image is milk and steak. See how quickly he was able to figure out those two things. It appears to be part of a shopping list or a list of ingredients needed for a recipe, as a list of food items. Other parts of the list are not visible or have been obscured. Interesting that it even like is aware that this is not that this is obscured, right? Like a traditional model that does like form recognition and analysis, like A, it probably wouldn't have figured these things out. B, it's probably wouldn't have known that there were obscured sections of the list. All right, here's the rest of it. It is a shopping list, lots of different stuff on that shopping list. Note on the beer says not in the full fridge, suggesting a reminder or emphasis on moderation on limiting the purchase quantity. You know, I find this just fascinating because its ability to look at something that we as humans can now look at and say, of course I know what that is. And now interpret that and turn that into text that has value is incredible. Like this is the amount of work necessary just to produce this in traditional machine learning would have been really significant. The fact that it can do this essentially out of box is crazy. Now, here's some language examples. Lots of different language examples. Here's what it says. It pulled that from the text. What are these words? What language are they coming from? Quickly telling us what language those words came from the image. Then turning that all these words say thank you in different languages. But that's not all. You asked the question, is there a possible mistranslation in this list? Yes, there's a mistranslation in the list. Gratias tibi is Latin for thanks to you, but thank you in Latin is commonly translated as just gratias. Also, spasvla should be spelled spasvilo. I probably just said it completely wrong. For thank you in Russian, right? Like this ability to not only read what's there, but then combine that with what we can do in the GPT text content is incredible, amazing stuff that we can do now by combining those two capabilities together. I find this fascinating. The ability to do something like defect detection. This is a good copy of a screw. Now tell me which of these are not good copies. Number 1, screw head is defective. Number 2, screw head is not defective. Just training it on this with 100 copies of a good screw, 100 copies of a bad screw. Here's one that's slightly defective. What does it do with it? The ability for it to be able to reason closer to the way that we reason as a human is amazing. This ability for us to combine those two capabilities together and integrate into our applications. Now check this out. This is a video of a car. As it goes through the video of the car, it's analyzing content from the car and then describing the damage on the car. Think about it as like an insurance adjuster walking around and recording a video of the car and then having it automatically summarize that for them in the context of their damage report. You wouldn't even need a person to do that. A human, just an individual could walk around their own car and just record it and have the AI start to summarize what that damage report looks like from the car. Maybe have a human validation of that. This is where this is able to get to now. This didn't exist prior to Ignite. Well, it did in some like very limited senses. This is now becoming a production service that you can take advantage of in your business. The ability to extract text from existing content, turn that into a markdown, turn that into JSON. Like the ability to translate from point A to point B, from image to text to structured content is something that we can take advantage of in our business. Now, what is this really doing? Yeah, you could say, yeah, I could do that before. I had form translation. I could turn that into JSON before. What you couldn't do is lower the bar of everyone being able to do this so quickly. The ability for so many people to be able to take advantage of this capability with less investment to be able to achieve these kinds of outcomes is incredible. So how do you do that? Microsoft released Azure AI Studio, which is a consolidated platform in Azure for you to build AI models, exist them in a consistent MLOps pattern, start leveraging multimodality capabilities, and then also integrate quality and ethics analysis into the context of the way that you're building them. And there's some examples of that I'll cover in a second. But Azure AI Studio is sort of the hero platform for building custom AI models that are mission driven. enables the capability for you to take advantage of the base AI capabilities available in GPT, GPT-4, GPT-4v, and then ground that using data sources that exist in your Azure environment or outside your Azure environment to produce value and create your own AI app or your own Microsoft Copilot. And one thing I'll talk about a little later is some of the experiences that they released at Ignite in terms of how to build those applications and also how you can plug Microsoft Copilot into those data sources to be able to fulfill information back out to your consumers. They also announced at Ignite vector search and as a component of Azure AI search. So this is an ability for us to simplify the ability for like it to understand adjacent terms in the context of AI searchability. So like I know that a shoe might be directly aligned to a Nike or a Reebok shoe, for example. Now, take that in the context of building an app. So I'm on a website, built a website to be able to sell tents. So many customers of ours are doing things like this today. How can I be helpful today? How should I take care of my tents? Surfacing information in the context of a chatbot on your application on your website with references to where that content was sourced from. But when you integrate the visual capability, it goes even further. How can I help you today? Recommend a tent like this for under $200. Hey there, here's the app. Here's the tent that you could use on our site for under $200 that you should go buy. So trying to draw this ability to interact with a human. I would do this when I go into Home Depot, right? I'd go to Home Depot, I've got on my phone, like, I need something that looks like this. I'm not sure where to buy it. Like, how often does that happen in my life? All the time. Like, I need a bolt that attaches this thing, or I need a hinge that broke off my kitchen drawer. Like, how do I fix this? Like, you go into Home Depot, you give them what you had, and you say, how can I find this thing? Imagine just showing that to AI and saying, what is this? How do I find it? Buy me a new one. And having it be able to translate that into what's being sold back to your customers. So this is really changing the ability for us to connect the customer ask more quickly to the customer transaction where you're providing value back to them. So there's a diverse amount of capabilities to build your own Copilot. The platform to do so is called Copilot Studio. This is a sort of WYSIWYG experience that you can build by like dragging and dropping different components onto a form to be able to build your own Copilot and to be able to deliver value back to your customers and use existing connectors in order to pull data from other sources. So Copilot Studio, for example, looks a lot like this. It can ingest generative AI sources. So for example, I might say, teach me about the content on your website. Now your mileage might vary on that. I've seen kind of good output, not so good output from that. But it can be a great start to be able to build your Copilot. It's based on the Copilot stack. So the same way Microsoft has been building their own Copilots is the way that you can build your Copilot in the context of the Microsoft Cloud. And then ultimately, when you're building that Copilot, you can take advantage of drag and drop capabilities as well as actions that pull information from other sources. So for example, you can see here, pulling data out of SAP and returning that information to the Copilot to be able to answer questions from a customer or to answer questions internally. You can see here a question, boy, I drew all over that. What are the lead times of the supplier Alpine Ski House? And then it's answering, on average, Alpine Ski House delivers product within 10 days of order placement. Over the past 6 months, they have maintained on-time delivery rate of 86% of our orders. I used to think about this as science fiction, like the idea that like we could actually do this. About 7 or 8 months ago, we said, well, what if we used Copilot? What if we built AI apps to ask questions of SQL? Like, could it develop, could the AI create the SQL query to ask the question of the SQL table? And now we have customers in production doing that. And to see that that's a real thing, that can you can truly interact with an application in that way is amazing. Now, the fact that you can leverage Copilot Studio to simplify that for certain sources is also making the bar to enter into that space even lower. What many people also have concerns about in the context of AI is risk management. Jailbreaking is like the popular thing now to do on LinkedIn, right? You're like, hey, I asked ChatGPT all these really interesting questions, and I like got it to tell me something it probably shouldn't have told me. Essentially, it's called jailbreaking an AI system, right? We want to ensure that it's only answering questions that it should be answering. So Microsoft has built something called jailbreak risk detection. That's goal is to help mitigate that. Now, we already mitigated by putting guardrails around it, but help mitigate it further by understanding when these kinds of risks are occurring and how we can leverage different controls to be able to manage a person's ability to jailbreak. Also notice that like things like material detection of text or material detection of code. So like searching for code that would be in a public repository that maybe shouldn't be inside of your bot would be examples of things that you can actually filter out through different types of pre-built filters. And these are things that are continuing to expand over time. The ability to do risk management, bias detection, and so on is something Microsoft's invested in really seriously as part of the AI journey. So you can notice here that this prompt was filtered due to content flagged as a jailbreak. This is something that they are trying to filter. They're filtering out via that risk management capability. You can see here also that once you've launched a particular platform, you're building metrics that you're evaluating over time to ensure that you're achieving the success that you look to achieve. So here's our metric results of people interacting with our platform, and then also validating the relevance and groundedness, which essentially is like, did I get it from real content? Is the kind of what that means, and then the retrieval score rating, and then also being able to evaluate it for where those jailbreak or other assets being leveraged in the context of the metrics that we're looking for. Okay, so tons of stuff in the context of building your own AI apps. Let's move a little bit into commodity AI. Now, what do I mean by commodity AI? What I mean by this is the AI that everyone in your organization takes advantage of as a result of just doing work. So think about you're watching Pride and Prejudice, and you see an individual just writing a letter to their sister, and it takes X number of weeks for that letter to even arrive. And this is how I communicate. Imagine if what we did in the business world is we like communicated via handwritten letters. Well, we'd all have much better penmanship, maybe, and it also maybe we think more about what we write, but it'd also be a lot slower. So we've driven a huge amount of efficiency just by like having email, right? Think about AI as like turning on another way of getting the same efficiency boost that we got from moving to email. Now, there's benefits of having email, there's negatives, like why do I check my phone so often? But what AI is going to enable is so much being done faster as a result of AI. Think of it as your like assistant in a sense. I also think about like password spell check is like a very simple example. Like I often spell things wrong. Spell check auto corrects those things for me. Now I don't have to worry about it because spell check essentially does it on its own. Imagine if that didn't exist. This is where AI is going, the ability to be almost transparent to the user and the ability for me to take advantage of this. So Copilot was one of the things that were announced. What is Copilot? Well, it essentially was Bing Chat Enterprise. Copilot is a free vehicle for you to be able to use ChatGPT in your business without a fear that that information will be used to train some future version of the model. It is essentially an internal version of ChatGPT. It cannot use any of your local data. It's only public data. So like if you had like a document that you wanted it to be able to answer questions about, that's not its function. Microsoft Copilot, not to be confused with M365 Copilot. They didn't make this confusing at all. But Microsoft Copilot is truly just that external like Bing Chat or ChatGPT kind of experience, but with Bing Chat integrated in for current relevant results. If you haven't tried it, try it now. Like it is a fantastic platform. I literally use it every day. It is a great asset for me to be able to get forward movement in my business. But it is not something that surfaces your internal data. You need a private ChatGPT instance or to use M365 Copilot in conjunction with that to be able to achieve that kind of impact. So that's where this comes in. Copilot for everything should probably be the way to describe that. Copilot for M365 is the one most people have been Copilot for M365 is sort of where people are thinking about this picture of the idea of accelerating AI on the basis of them being able to take advantage of everything that exists in their M365 tenant. So like Copilot can leverage data that's in Teams, in SharePoint, in email, in documents, and then surface that to be able to get things done. And I'll show you some examples of that. Copilot for GitHub. This was really the first Copilot that Microsoft released. And what we've already seen from the metrics of this is that the people who are doing work using GitHub X are significantly more productive in their ability to produce as a result of being able to do things they didn't know how to do faster. So like when in the past where I might have went out to like Stack Overflow or something, or Googled it to be able to learn something, I can leverage Copilot for GitHub to be able to find that faster. Think about like, okay, if every time I was writing an email and I didn't know how to spell a word, I went out to Google and I had to like Google the name, the word I was trying to spell and go out to the dictionary and get the right spelling and then type it. Like the difference between that and spell check. That's the difference between Copilot for GitHub and not having it, and the ability for it to like help you through the process, like this asset that helps you move faster. All of these capabilities are really enhancing. Copilot for Power Platform, this ability to like create Power BI reports from Word alone. Like if I have the data surfaced, can I then use my words to be able to express what I want in the context of a Power BI report? So all of that is made possible as a result of the graph, large language models, integration with different M365 apps or your own custom work, and then web search. All that comes together in the context of Microsoft 365 Copilot. Here's something I found really fascinating. Microsoft at Ignite released Work Trends Index on people who had been using Copilot and found dramatic improvement in their productivity and their daily work. But the thing I found most funny was Jared Sporetto during his talk said, one of the things that we asked people was, would you choose Copilot over a free lunch? And 77% of people did say they would choose Copilot over a free lunch. That is a really interesting question. I certainly would. And what this really tells you is that people value the ability to be able to be more as people. Like they value the ability to like take the repeatable tasks off their plate and focus more on creativity that they can drive their individual capabilities into, and have these sort of things that they do that they have to do, but do them faster. What if I could do that? That's exactly like I would take a spell check over a free lunch. I certainly would take Copilot over a free lunch. So I'm curious about how that number shifts over time once people get more and more dependent on what Copilot does for them in their everyday life. So what does it look like? Well, you got to think about each individual app and what it looks like. So for example, this was a Copilot for Whiteboard. This is the summary that Copilot produced out of that whiteboard to be able to take next steps on the meeting that was happening. Same kind of thing here inside of Copilot for Outlook. The ability to summarize what had happened in the past from that particular, from that email, or to sound like me in the context of writing a new email. So write an email for me to this person, sound like me. And it literally sounds like you in the context of how you write emails, not just in the context of like how a generic GPT would write emails. Like, sometimes when people like, I use this to write a blog, and it sounds like you use GPT to write a blog, like it's overly formal and you're not a formal person. Well, how can I then leverage Copilot to be more like the way I would write it? And that's what we're seeing. I find this one fascinating, the ability to do summarization of what happened in the meeting notes, the ability for it to actually gather action items coming out of that meeting. So for example, what are my action items? You were assigned to draft a list of potential home improvement concepts to explore in the next session. The ability for it to understand what you had done. Now, this is building on Teams Premium. One of the things I really love about Teams Premium is its ability to track what had happened in the context of that previous conversation. And to know in notes what you were responsible for, setting due dates and doing them. I think that's the meeting summary capability in and of itself is freaking awesome. Like if you've ever seen a meeting summary coming out of Copilot, you are going to be blown away. Like its ability to like transcribe the meeting, compile that into who was speaking with some problems in terms of like who the speaker is sometimes, but then turn that into a clearly describable set of things. It's like, the most annoying job in a meeting is, can you be the scribe for this meeting? And not having to ask a person that, like literally have Copilot be the scribe, is pretty crazy. Also, the ability for it to jumpstart producing documents. So draft a proposal for this based upon these notes. Starts creating the draft, right? Now, think about this in the context, not in just even the generic way you just see it here, but like you have templates for your organization. Here's the templates of how I write a statement of work, for example. What if I could tell Copilot to write the statement of work for me? Well, I've got the templates, I've got the estimate, go write the statement of work. Why do I need to write it myself? Like, I hate writing statements of work. Maybe it can do it for me. This is the ability for us to like jumpstart through that process. So a lot of customers I'm talking with are like trying to accelerate their ability to produce quotes. AI is great at that, taking information from a customer, turning it into something that gets sent back to the customer. Copilot is a piece of that puzzle, probably not the whole puzzle, but it's a piece of the puzzle. Also, the ability to use Copilot on a smartphone. This is an asset that comes along with the Microsoft M365 Copilot capabilities, or if you're building your own sort of custom Copilot, custom GPT platform in the context of your business. Teams Premium, we just kind of talked a little bit about this, but intelligent recap, person tracking, like this whole person tracking thing is pretty cool. The only thing I've seen problems with it on is if you're like a hybrid meeting room, you only have one speaker, it sort of attaches it to the person that you joined it from. Like if you have like Kurt joins the meeting and he's the one that has the speaker on, like everything sounds like it was produced by Kurt. So like there's some issues with that. But like as that iterates and more people are like using intelligent capabilities in the context of the speakers, that'll go away. I think the suggested task notes, the summaries that produce out of Copilot are just game changing. Fantastic. So here's a summary. Copilot being leveraged in other platforms. This is something that is about something about like integrating with other plugins. So what you're going to find is that a lot of the mission-driven scenarios, like the things we first talked about, create a mission-driven AI system that's focused specifically on your business, that's doing a specific job, is going to integrate with commodity Copilot capabilities. So like commodity and M365, like everyone's better because they have this capability. Well, I wrote a quoting AI specific to my business that knows my business inside and out, and it can quote at an extremely high accuracy and precision of what it needs to do. I would build that custom because that needs to be very accurate. I'm going to tie those two things together by a plugin that Copilot on the generic or commodity side can then reference and use the quoting platform I did on the mission-driven side and vice versa. So what I can do in the same context then is extend Copilot. So Microsoft Copilot is essentially a platform to be able to plug into other things. So I build these other things. Now I can have them talk with each other to be able to have the Microsoft Copilot interact with the mission-driven story, and the mission-driven story interact with Microsoft Copilot. Whew, okay, we have a lot more to go. I hope you're hanging with me. This is fun. The next part of this is the data platform. This year, it was all about Fabric. What is Fabric? Fabric is a SaaS version of a data platform. Okay, think about Fabric as taking all the complexity of building an Azure data platform and putting that into a SaaS platform that's essentially like Power BI dipping lower. Okay, everybody's gotten really comfortable with Power BI. Like Power BI is the main experience that companies use to be able to build intelligent data experiences that they can surface data and visualize it and see the different scorecards and click on things and enable business users to be able to like surface data for their own consumption. What Microsoft essentially said is, what if we just like let them dip lower into the actual data platform via the Power BI experience? And that's basically what they did. So like when you sign up for Fabric, it's basically like I'm still in Power BI, but I've like now like expanded that world to include all the data that would exist there too, and the data domains that would be surfacing in it. So is it a little new, and is it like just kind of emerging and are there missing features? Yeah, totally. Like it's it's ready for prime time for like a lot of things, but it's missing certain things as well. If I was building a data platform from the ground up for the purposes of analytics, though, I'd strongly consider using Microsoft Fabric if I didn't have a big data team. Like if I was trying to like simplify that whole experience, OneLake's goal, for example, is just put the data there and surface it in the context of the data domains that need access to it. Don't worry about like how you structure it in the context of Azure. We'll take care of that. That's what Fabric essentially is. Lots of interesting goodies in this space. Like I could spend an hour just talking about Fabric, but we don't have that much time. So this is going to be a really, really fun space that's going to evolve fast. You'll notice that things like lineage are already lit up in Fabric. This is where capabilities like Microsoft Purview were kind of first on the scene, and they're leveraging that same capability here in Fabric. So like, where did it come from? A Azure source, an Amazon S3 bucket, the Dataverse. Here's how that all fits into the lake. Here's how it fits downstream. The ability to understand my source and destination of all of my data, and in many senses have it create that for me versus me having to maintain that over time. I think that's pretty beautiful. One thing I am incredibly interested in is this idea of mirroring. And what mirroring is about is simplifying data movement. So like a lot of times we have a originating database, we have our destination reporting environment, we run a process through Azure Data Factory to move data from point A to point B. Mirroring's goal is to surface data from that source without having to go through a sort of long-running process and to not impact the performance of the source database platform. It's almost like magic. It's like saying magic. It's almost real-time availability of that data in the context of the reporting environment. And Cosmos Database, Azure SQL, Snowflake can do that now as a component of Microsoft Fabric mirroring. This is crazy. Like this is ability to take advantage of real-time data without having the need to do the long-running process. I think this is really interesting. It's going to have a lot of impact on companies that have huge repositories in these sources and are trying to surface it for their customers. And then they talk about Copilot, and Copilot in Fabric is really cool. Really what Copilot in Fabric is about is asking questions of data. So let's create a report. So imagine you surface the data to your business audience. Let's create a report. Create a report showing order status for the loyalty program members. Great. Here's an order status for loyalty program members. Create a narrative with Copilot. Provide 5 formatted bullets with key facts about order status for loyalty program members. Boom. It's creating this box. Man, sorry about all the kind of writing over the thing here, but like there's the box where that output went. Like you can do some really incredible things right inside the reporting platform without having to be a reporting expert. Like in the past, I had to have someone understand how Power BI worked to build this report. Maybe I still do need it to edit it in certain contexts, but you can also do edits through this Copilot experience. What this is doing is it continues to lower the bar. Like I think if I had to like keep repeating this comment, it would be you keep seeing the bar lowered to get into building these kinds of experiences through human language. So me not being an expert on building this or that widget in this Power BI report is irrelevant to my ability to get impact because I can express it in human language via Copilot. You'll also note that Microsoft Purview Hub is now turned on in the Microsoft Fabric platform. So all the things that people are doing in Purview are now lit up there as well, which really means that like the governance platform came along for the ride. That's really important because a lot of people start using that across various aspects of their data estate, and they wanted that to exist inside of Fabric as well. Okay, let's go to Windows and Microsoft 365. This is that kind of dropping below the line. And I have a special treat for you at the end of this presentation, by the way. So stick with me through what we're talking about here. So we're by no means near the end. Microsoft M365. So what did Microsoft talk about in the context of Windows this year? Why was this important? Well, we already talked about Copilot in Windows. That's part of the sort of Windows 11 platform. They talked a little bit about Surface. I'm not going to go much into that. I think that's kind of self-explanatory. What I will talk more about is the sort of Windows 365 journey. What you see here is an iPad. Why is this important? Well, they built now the Windows app. And the Windows app lets you go seamlessly from your iPad or any endpoint directly into a Windows 365 PC. It looks just like logging into a regular PC. It's cloud PC. I can hit it from anywhere. Why is this important? Well, it's important because there's a lot of use cases where I need to be able to hit a cloud-based PC from a low-cost device or from any device. This could be mergers and acquisitions, which is a huge use case. It could be shared physical devices, it could be temporary workspaces, it could be disaster recovery, bring your own PC scenarios, the offshore development. There's lots of use cases where I need to leverage these sort of cloud PCs. They've made this continually drastically simpler for both development audiences as well as sort of generic computing scenarios. No more like taking care of RDS farms or Citrix environments, leveraging Cloud PC very, very easily, and Windows 365 experience is here and here now. These are Azure AD joined or Windows joined. These are great opportunities for us to be able to simplify our working environment for many of our users. This is really cool. I think they're doing some really great things here and simplifying the whole experience. So how do I tell the difference? Well, some cases, Windows 365 is the right choice. In our cases, Azure Virtual Desktop are the right choice. Windows 365 is like a simpler experience, easy to buy, very little specialized training, onboarded through the Windows app. Azure Virtual Desktop enables more options, easier to move from, say, an existing RDS farm over to it, has more customization. Both are built on the same platform. Both are things that you can take advantage of in Azure today. So there's, I would suggest that you explore both of these in the context of your business, especially if you're on an RDS farm or you're using Citrix today. Like, if you're using Citrix, it's like a huge opportunity for cost savings, like tomorrow. But from the context of everything else, has so many opportunities for advancement. This is a shot of the Windows app. One client across W365, Azure Virtual Desktop, RDS, DevBox, any of those sources, you're using that same client. And that app can then function on your iOS device, your Android device, your PC, etc. And HTML5 kind of experiences for your Androids, or sorry, your sort of non-supported devices as well. Also, what's exciting about this is it supports passwordless authentication. That is a huge step forward. Like the idea of us all moving to passwordless and not having passwords is a fantastic future. So the ability for us to keep driving toward that, now supported with capability right within the W365 platforms, as well as Azure Virtual Desktop. They also announced Windows 365 Frontline. What is Frontline? Frontline is like essentially any worker in your environment that you wouldn't traditionally give a PC to. Maybe they have a shared use PC, they're a manufacturing user, they're a nurse or a doctor in a hospital, they are a broker, lots of use cases where they may not have like a direct PC, right? Frontline worker capabilities are really coming a long way. So W365 for frontline workers, letting them log in with their specific user to be able to do work. Also announcing the ability for certain protections to be built into those, watermarking, screen capture protection being built in, and then even enabling auto scaling scenarios for like ramp up and ramp down. This is where a lot of cost savings can come in. I just recently assessed an environment that had something like 200 personal desktops running in VMware all the time. Like they're basically always on. And like the cost of that from a hardware standpoint is enormous. To move that to the cloud and keep them running all the time, equally enormous. What if I optimize that so it's only on when they use it? Like that's a big difference in terms of cost. So Indian scaling them up and scaling them down. They also talked about some ridiculously large personal desktop sizes you can deploy, which I guess you have to protect and like who can do that or not. But like the ability for you to have certain workstations that are like super huge ramped up workstations and ones that are a lot more scaled down. They even showed an ability for you to see how like where the optimizations could exist. This is more about the frontline worker capabilities. They launched a new Teams capability for you to log on with your Entra ID for which used to be called Azure AD. The Entra ID into iOS for Teams. The Teams worker on frontline gets its own experience. They can even enable Copilot for the frontline workers that they can get productive work do activities within the context of, so I'm a manufacturing worker. I want to know like what my schedule is going to be today. I want to be involved in the organization, not like a second-class citizen. I can have a Teams experience that's specific to me as a frontline worker that I'm participating in, and I'm able to kind of interact with the rest of the organization around. So very interesting capabilities available in the context of frontline. Okay, Microsoft Loop. What in the heck is this? I'll be honest with you, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. So what is Microsoft Loop? It's essentially like a new collaborative platform that's kind of integrates with Teams. Also feels a little bit like Teams. It's a Notion competitor, if you're familiar with Notion. I'm still trying to figure out like if it truly is something they're launching for like people that never are using existing Microsoft platforms, like if they're on Notion and they just want to convert them. You'll see like Loop components show up in the context of Teams now, like these sort of subcomponents built by Loop that are generated in your Teams meeting or your chat that like kind of surface there. This is happening, and where does it go from here, and how do I make it more than what I had been experiencing in my previous life? So you can just watch the space on Loop, know where it's going to go. Think about it in the context of like it delivering more. I'm not sure yet, but it's exciting and it's interesting. So play around with it. You can go out to loop.microsoft.com. If you're an M365 user, you can turn it on. You can play around with it. Sometimes it feels a little bit like a Teams interface, but I hope it's not. We'll see. But know it's there. Okay, we're going to get into the Azure platform, and then the special treat at the end is I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that Mark Russinovich covered, which is always my favorite Ignite session, the Mark Russinovich session, because it's all about interesting things that are going to happen in the future. I would definitely watch his session if you didn't watch it directly. There's a bunch of bad dad jokes in it, so just forgive him for that. But definitely one of the most interesting people in terms of running sessions at Ignite. So let's talk about Azure platform, and then we'll go into that. So in case you were not expecting this, there is a Copilot for Azure. What does the Copilot for Azure do? Well, it lets you interact via the resource graph with your Azure environment. How many resources do I have? You have 9,830 resources in your Azure environment. I can't do that, Hal. And then you have like, for example, which regions have the most virtual machines? Here's the regions that have the most virtual machines. Give me the query that you use to produce that, and it can provide that query. So right here is the Copilot giving me information about where those virtual machines exist, asking you essentially any kind of question about where things are, what they're doing. Where I think this gets really interesting is taking actions. Confirm you want to restart operation on reboot this virtual machine. I just say reboot the virtual machine. Hal. Confirm that you want to restart the operation on the below resources. Do you want to proceed? Yes, restart it. What, and then even getting into billing. What subscription caused the increase in December? Wow, this is where we start to get really real, right? Contoso billing account experienced increases in card charges from 18,000 to 19,000. Here's the lists down below. Here's the list of subscriptions that related to that percentage of change. The ability for you to be able to get information, have it help you optimize your environment is pretty awesome. Like this is really where the power of having things existing within a cloud environment that has a control plane becomes real. So be like, well, okay, well, what's the difference really between having it in my on-premise VMware environment and here? This is becoming the difference, right? The ability that like the platform it's in is queryable. We used to think about a CMDB doing this job. This is now what I can do in the platform itself. I can ask the platform about what's deployed. I can ask the platform to optimize my resources and do things based upon those resources and combine it with other data sources to be able to do things with those resources. That's really game changing. How is this built? Well, it's built the same way we build the rest of the Copilot platforms. So you have your tooling that exists behind the scenes, you have the large language model, and then you have your Azure portal. And all of that allows you to be able to work against the Azure resource graph and to interact with the platform policy, governance, cost management, logging, monitoring, tagging. If you haven't built your environment in an appropriate landing zone using the cloud adoption framework, pause. Now is a good time to fix that by leveraging the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework to build out the right structure. But then on top of that exists all these other things. So Copilot in Azure is going to be really, really interesting. I have to have a preview of that. I'm not sure if it's enabled for everyone yet, but it's certainly something that you're going to be able to take advantage of and to be able to drive efficiency in your Azure environment. All right. So other exciting things in Azure platform itself. Lots of ways to run containers. You'll see that there is Azure Container Apps and there's Azure Kubernetes Service. A lot of conversation about Azure Kubernetes Service as a vehicle to run almost any kind of container and to do so well. Azure Container Apps is built on AKS and is essentially like a grid computing platform. So if you think about like Azure Container Apps is like, I don't have to mess with AKS. I'm just going to deploy my container into ACA and it's going to do it for me. So many developers will prefer that because it's simple. You can deploy it, it runs well, and I don't have to worry about it as like a platform. Azure Kubernetes Services provides that control for me to be able to do a whole lot of things within the container environment, but I have to know about Kubernetes and I have to be able to manage it and understand it. Is it industry standard? Absolutely. So Azure Kubernetes actually represents the greatest scaling that's happening within Azure right now. Containers represent the majority of things that's happening, interestingly enough. Azure Container Apps is a sort of extraction of that to be able to provide a seamless, easy to use container management platform. So what Microsoft's also focusing on is uniting all of this. So GitHub, from GitHub Actions and Azure DevOps into Azure Container Registry, into Azure Kubernetes Fleet Management, into Azure Kubernetes Service and ACA, and then all the platform capabilities that surround it, like Azure Policy that says what you can do or can't do, and that existing in the cloud environment and in the edge environment as a management platform. Really excited about like how Microsoft is enabling a new set of capabilities. And what I'm seeing in companies is this is where individuals are having to upskill. They're having to upskill around infrastructure as code, Azure Policy, data platform services, Kubernetes, containers, deployment through CI/CD pipelines. Like this is where a lot of legacy infrastructure people are needing to upskill to be able to be relevant in the context of what's happening in Azure. Don't get left behind in like what's happening in the on-premise environments with VMware and so on. Like understand that like even they are moving toward infrastructure as code, right? This is an opportunity for everyone to kind of modernize your skill set toward cloud computing skills. And you can see how they're building strength on strength with this. Like what was difficult to do in Azure Policy before is becoming easier and now built on with everything else that they're doing. So a lot of interesting toolchain capabilities announced for AI in the context of AKS. You'll happen to know that like many AI platform activities are done in the context of containers. Some of it can be easy to do, some of it is difficult to do. Building sort of scalable platforms to do that work is something that they've invested a lot of work in AKS for. Also noting a whole lot of different types of capabilities and scale, like landing zone accelerator, GPU profiles, so new capabilities to use, sort of accelerated capabilities around AI for leveraging certain types of GPUs, leveraging vector search are now available. So exciting stuff there. And then really interesting consumption plan stuff. So one of the things that was talked about is like, hey, how do I like optimize the consumption of Azure Functions and other capabilities at scale? So one of the problems that exists in Azure Functions before was you couldn't do a private IP and not use a premium SKU. Now you have the ability to use a flex consumption plan that's in preview that would let you function truly in a serverless land and use private networking and only pay for what you use. So this is getting us like incrementing closer to grid computing, where I just kind of have something I want to run and it runs in a serverless way in alignment with the actual consumption that I need, as opposed to like, hey, you're doing an Azure function, but yeah, you still have to spin up like an actual like dedicated Azure function because you want to have a private networking IP. Like that is something that is being mitigated now. Azure Functions Flex Consumption, continuing, there's more focus on this. There's a whole presentation on this topic. Just know that this is like making it more efficient. End-to-end platform for intelligent apps. This is just kind of like Microsoft's slide on like all the things they do in the context of their intelligent app story. You can just take the screenshot later if you want to use it on one of your slides, but it's useful, I think, to kind of see this on one slide. Okay, last 10 minutes, we're going to talk about cool stuff that Mark Russinovich talked about, who's like many people's Microsoft tech hero in a sense. First thing that I thought was really cool, this is like the really cool section. So the first thing that he talked about was power usage effectiveness in the context of Azure data centers. So when did they first start Azure data centers? In 2089. This metric is how efficient they are with energy, power usage effectiveness. So you can see when they went through some density, they said this is basically every co-location data center right here is 2007 tech. And he's like, pretty much every tier 2 data center runs like that. This is what a tier 2 data center looks like. And then 2009 containment, you mentioned that then they went to those modular data centers. You saw them kind of come in with they're like in trucks, and they moved them in modules, and they kind of moved them out in modules. They actually moved away from that, interestingly enough, back over to hyperscale, and then into different types of form factors. And then what he spent a lot of time talking about on the far right is this idea of sort of rapid deployment and so on. But this main focus here was about energy usage in the context of cooling, and a lot of optimization around where they place workloads, how they place workloads, when they can shut them off, how hot they run them, and also using a variety of different types of cooling technology. So I find this conversation fascinating because you can tell, like at scale, like Microsoft's trying to get every dollar out of this that they can, right? But B, it's also trying to drive efficiency from the overall ecosystem, so you can drive down costs and you can drive out the sort of impact to the environment that gets generated as a result of this. So very interesting story. You talked a lot about the kind of cold plates, like how are they trying to enhance the cooling capability? Cold plates into microfluidic cooling. This was an interesting conversation in itself. It'd probably take us 5 minutes to talk about it. But if you want to watch this session, I thought this was a fascinating topic. That if you're into hardware, just talking a little bit about like what does this mean in the context of creating the next generation of sort of cooled platforms. He talked also about infrastructure offload. So like once a problem gets big enough, the abstraction layer between virtual machine and hardware injects too much inefficiency that wastes energy, wastes compute on sort of things that aren't providing value. So this is where the story of Azure Boost comes to play. So Azure Boost is like a specialized set of hardware that lets them offload the actual processing through to a physical hardware card that drives it straight to the hardware from the virtual machine. So this was interesting because it's really about like at scale, especially GPU processing, driving down the cost of that GPU processing. One of the things he mentioned, I don't think I have a slide on this, but one of the things he mentioned is that their new AI supercomputer that's in Azure that OpenAI will be using is the third largest supercomputer in the world, and it's even bigger than what the third largest will be. And they can't tell the exact details, but like they're building these massive supercomputers. So if they can drive efficiency from that in terms of the ability to leverage every ounce of that hardware, this creates a ton of value. So I found this really interesting just in terms of like where the advancements are going. So he talks a little bit about what the difference between like the originating Azure architecture would be and then what Azure Boost does to be able to surface direct storage capabilities to the virtual machines. And then what the impact of that was, which is dramatic improvement in the ability to get value from that actual hardware through to the virtual machine. He also talked about Project Forge, which is a kind of capability that they have yet to actually name, which is an ability for sort of Azure-wide scheduling of AI workloads. Think like I'm training these different models. I'm deploying those across an Azure-wide scale to be able to optimize how each are trained and to be able to use every like piece of capacity that I have. So essentially, like what happens now is there's a single pool for all. What this does is essentially creates an ability for us to fill that remaining capacity versus it being siloed out into these like little isolated slots. Now, it doesn't mean like you can't still keep your own pool, right? But like when you're training these big workloads, it allows us to be able to take advantage of that. And what this means to us is we can drive costs down, right? We can drive down costs because we can use more of the hardware. I thought the ability to then schedule this around the world was really interesting. And then he talked about an idea called Azure Project Flywheel, which is an ability to optimize how how prompts are generated, excuse me, across and processed across a large language model. So one of the things that they limit and have challenges with is like the linear scale of running your different prompts. But what he talked about was how like many prompts actually leverage the same ask, like they have the same need. So what if, how can we schedule those in a way that better takes advantage of the like that, like I can do the Tetris blocks more effectively, essentially, is the main point of this. That with Azure Project Flywheel, I can stack those Tetris blocks in a way that I get the like 5-point Tetris, as opposed to like it just looks like a complete mess, and I'm not able to optimize my ability to process. Again, opportunity to get more value out, drive costs down, drive performance up. One of the things we've experienced through AI projects is the cost of those projects can sometimes be outside of what people would expect, or it can sometimes be like slower than what people would expect because of the need to transfer and process. This is how they're addressing it. Also, something interesting was the ability to create smaller models. We always talk about like large language models, the ability to create smaller models with higher quality content that leads to similar or better results. Now, to a sense, this is like somewhat obvious. Like if I give it better content, like it's going to be a better result, But what they're essentially getting at is that like I can read still a large amount, but I can produce something that has higher quality. And so like, why can a human who can really only read about 1 billion words, but large language models read 1 trillion words, why does a human still outperform a large language model? Well, there's a lot of things about that, but they learn differently, and maybe they learn from higher quality, or there's certain parts of our brain that interact differently than a large language model does for certain. How do we get those things closer? And I thought that was a fascinating part of the conversation. Okay, and the last thing that I'm going to hit on here is something I think really interesting, which is how do I get an AI model to forget? So he wrote, when he came back from sabbatical, Mark Russinovich worked with his team to release a paper called Who is Harry Potter? And the point of this paper was to say, how can I get a large language model to not know who Harry Potter is? And you can see the kind of obvious benefit of this, right? Like, what if a large language model learns something it should never have learned? Like content it shouldn't have learned, maybe it learned the wrong thing. Like we all learn wrong things in our life, right? Like I learned that like that something leads to something, that it's not the right like ultimate learning. Like I've been influenced by something that's caused me to understand something wrong. Like this is an opportunity for us to think, what if I had to address that in the context of a large language model? So this is all about, what if I could get it to not know who Harry Potter is? So this is the large language model that knows who Harry Potter is. This is the one who doesn't know who Harry Potter is, and is actually hallucinating about a fake Harry Potter that is not in any of those shows. And very interesting that like it no longer knows that. So I find that if you ever want to read that paper, very interesting paper, but also interesting talk by Mark Russinovich on this particular topic. So essentially it's forget while retaining performance that's necessary to do this well. Okay, holy smokes. We actually got through this. Like I moved a little faster at the end, but we actually got through it. So as you are closing down, I want you to know about a couple things. First, later on this week, we have another session, another event on reinventing productivity with Copilot. So if you thought the Copilot stuff was interesting here, Chris Blackburn and us are going to go through all the ways that Copilot can reinvent productivity. We're going to show a lot more examples, a lot more content on that topic itself, and really dig into it. So that's later on this week. Next week, we have the top OpenAI production use cases for revenue and operations. This is showing real life in production use cases of OpenAI and OpenAI copilots that are being used to drive value. I think you'll be really excited about what that has the ability to produce. And before you leave, please fill out the survey. Hopefully this was exciting or interesting to you. We know we covered a lot of content. It is like truly the best of Ignite. And I hope that you found this a good way to spend your hour. I certainly found it fun to put together, and hopefully it's something that you'll get a lot of value from as well. You can absolutely get the recording after you filled that out, and we'd be happy to share the deck with you as an asset as well. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for spending time with us.